Tim and I met in an English literature class our junior year of college, and we've been together the 10 years since. While he ended up going into IT, I stayed in the liberal arts track and ended up doing non-profit work after college when I realized I didn't actually want to be a school teacher. Just to say that we always assumed he'd out-earn me by a considerable margin. Though when he made more, I always insisted we split things evenly to avoid potential resentment down the road. I've had sort of a non-linear career path, but ended up switching to the corporate world. To make a long story short, my liberal arts degree and time doing non-profit work gave me a lot of skills that enable me to really excel professionally in some more niche areas. I recently started a new job as a consultant, making way more than I'd ever anticipated. When I got the offer, I told Tim that the pay was amazing, but he didn't ask about the actual amount, and I didn't want to be braggy about it, especially since I was fairly sure it was above his current income. Well, we just put in an application for a new place, and in the process of having to submit our pay stubs, it's become obvious that I make roughly 30% more than he does now. I expected him to think that was cool, since he's a feminist and has always been super supportive of my career. But instead he started to make increasingly harsh jabs about how I cheated the system to get where I am. That no English Lit major makes more than a cybersecurity professional without cheating somehow. His major point is that I got my first job out of nepotism, which set me up to trample more qualified people who didn't have the same advantages. It's true that I got my first post-college job after being referred by a sorority sister, but it was for non-profit work making $22K year, not exactly at somebody's daddy's firm. He also points out that at my first corporate job, I snagged a big promotion after volunteering to take on starting up the company's diversity //equity / inclusion program, and I'll admit that were I a white man, it's highly unlikely I would have been able to be the face of the eventually high-profile diversity program. Tim also notes that I was awarded a small college scholarship for being a promising female writer, when no such scholarship existed for males. But all that said, I still don't feel like I cheated the system, and it makes me angry to listen to him joke about it. Especially since I grew up blue-collar and worked full-time while going to school full-time to afford my degree. I reached a breaking point yesterday when he made a crack about how the new / first woman on his team is an obvious diversity hire. I told him that his jokes about women cheating the system to get ahead aren't funny or guy talk ribbing, as he says. They make him sound like an insecure little boy. He told me I was being a naive Karen, and we haven't really talked since yesterday. My daughter is 16 years old and in high school. I noticed recently that she's been behaving in a bad manner, constantly commenting on other people's looks, belongings, calling them stuff that isn't cool, and just being insensitive. It's like she lost a filter or something, because usually she's polite, but my wife suspected that our daughter's sudden misbehavior occurred after she started hanging out with new girls from the school. Basically the mean type, and have picked on their behavior. I've sat with my daughter and had many discussions about how her behavior has been negatively affecting everyone around her. Our housemaid is the person most affected here, and my daughter has chosen her to be her target for hair, clothes, etiquette, criticism. She has complained about our daughter calling her offensive names like filthy and gross for cleaning certain areas in our house. I took a stand and explicitly told my daughter I'd punish her if she ever said stuff like that to our housemaid again. Last week my daughter had a party to go to. Earlier that day she called our housemaid filthy, so I grounded her by not letting her go to the party. She threw a fit and called our housemaid a liar, saying she never called her that. That was the end of it. Days later my daughter came to me saying she couldn't find her iPhone after looking everywhere. She asked me to call her number, and I did. My wife and I were stunned to discover that the iPhone was ringing inside our housemaid's bag. I had in confrontation with her immediately, and she denied and cried, saying she never touched the phone nor had any idea how it got there. I noticed my daughter calling her thief repeatedly, so I told her to stop and go to her room. I checked the indoor camera before continuing the argument and saw my daughter place her iPhone inside our housemaid's bag. I was livid. I apologized to the housemaid and gave her the rest of the day off. I then showed the video to my daughter, and she was absolutely speechless. I said what she did was immoral and straight up offensive to tamper with that poor woman's livelihood over a petty party she couldn't go to. I told her she was grounded and will have to spend the night in the backyard. She is a germaphobe. But she cried, begging me to not make her sleep with the dirt, insects, and hot temp. I refused to discuss it or I'd make it 2 nights. My wife said I should go easy on her, but I said calling people filthy and accusing them of stealing wasn't okay. In fact, it was the absolute worst. I then went through with my punishment. The reason I chose this punishment was because of the fact that my daughter says she is a germaphobe and used this as excuse to insult others' hygiene and appearance. Our backyard has dirt and bugs in it, and this kind of things get her uncomfortable, but other than that the backyard is 100% safe. My sister was set to marry a guy who was a complete douchebag. He seemed like a nice catch to any outsider. He was tall, handsome, very confident, a doctor. Basically the sort of guy any woman would swoon over. Unfortunately, he was a sociopathic, unrepentant narcissist, devoid of any empathy, who would take out his anger on anybody he felt beneath him and seemed to enjoy doing it. You know how basically they say, don't look at how your partner treats you, look at how he treats others. And that's how he'll eventually treat you. My sister didn't pick up on that. I picked up on it early. This guy was really mean. Would berate and insult people for the smallest thing and would lose his cool with anybody who looked at him the wrong way. He started doing it to me, and I told my sister early on, this guy's an asshole. She was like, nah, you two will eventually get along, you just got off on the wrong start. I told him I've seen him do that to other people, but she seemed to think, oh, but he's nice to me, I'm the special one. Maybe I can change him. Or I have no idea what she was thinking. After about 2 years together, when they were engaged, the cracks were evident. My parents loved him. His dad and my dad go way back. They both went to the same medical school together and have been close friends for decades. Her fiancé is also good friends with my 2 older brothers. After 2 years, my sister was realizing this guy was an asshole. He's always been an asshole, and he won't change. There was a really painfully obvious example one day when we were having dinner, and my sister's fiancé and my dad were having a discussion about something political. My sister tried to offer her opinion into the discussion, and they both snickered. Then this guy just started berating her and ripping into her in front of everyone, making her feel this small. I could sense her pain. She was just quiet and just sat there taking it. I was thinking, what are you doing with this guy? He has no respect for you. He has no love for you. Another time our family was at this dinner function where a lot of big people were around. My sister's fiancé completely left my sister alone at the table with me, and was sitting at this other table with 2 women, very obviously flirting with them semi-drunk. He just left her all alone at the table. I asked her what was wrong, why was he ignoring her? She told me they had had an argument earlier and this was his way of punishing her. You see what I mean when I say this guy is a complete sociopath? My sister and I are really close, and even though I'm younger by far, little brothers aren't devoid of wisdom. And I've been urging her from day one to break up with this guy before she gets in too deep. Well, now that she'd spent 2 years with him and was engaged, she was obviously in too deep. And she used to tell me about all the outbursts he has, how he treats her with no respect. We often had long discussions, just me and her, where she'd spill open like a can of beans and just divulge all the bullshit that he's put her through recently. Sometimes she'd cry and I'd be there to help her out, but she still seemed to want to stick with him. She actually convinced herself that he loved her behind all that horrible treatment, and couldn't pull herself to cancel the engagement, what with our parents, his parents, everyone counting on it. She knew they'd all say she's crazy, turning down this smart, handsome doctor. I kept urging her to break up, but she stuck with the he'll change or he loves me deep down excuses. It all came to a head when one day she very publicly exploded at him. We were having a huge dinner, both sides of our families, and I was sitting next to him. He kept bullying me the entire night. Move your elbows over, couldn't you wear something a bit more presentable? Stop sticking your hand out like that, it's rude, don't you think you've had enough of that? If I asked him to pass a bowl or the sauce or something, he'd hand it over but then pull away and be like, say please, say thank you. He was smiling the entire time, laughing. My 2 older brothers were also snickering. They didn't seem to mind this guy was publicly bullying me and having fun with it. He and my dad started having one of their conversations again. And my dad started airing out all his general frustrations and disappointments regarding me. And they started both talking about my life openly in front of me. Her fiancé then turned to me and started openly lecturing me, and when I tried to ignore him, "Hey, are you listening to me? What's the matter with you? Your dad never taught you any respect?" My sister just then basically exploded. She was sitting at the other side of the table, guessing she didn't want to be near him. But she was watching what was going on the entire time. My sister just then basically exploded. She was sitting at the other side of the table, guessing she didn't want to be near him. But she was watching what was going on the entire time. I am a 43 years old female, have been with my partner, he's 50, for 6 years now. We have been living together for 5 of them. We are not married and we do not plan to marry in the future. I have a son, he's 19, that is currently a high school senior. My partner has a daughter, she's 21, who is going to college. When I met my partner, I was a widow of 3 years. I am lucky enough to have a very lucrative business and some family money. Also, my late husband left a substantial estate, including the house we live in. The house is a family home, so it passed to my son as the only heir. My partner also makes good money and the difference in our lifestyles was pretty much negligible. But while I and my late husband made sure to not spoil our son, he was responsible for keeping his room clean even though we have a housekeeper. He had chores during the weekends. We taught him how to cook, his allowance is reasonable, he has to save for expensive purchases like a car, a PS5, etc. My current partner and his ex-wife spoil their daughter rotten. Due to an incident when we first moved in together, she demanded my son's bedroom since it was the second biggest. Got rejected since it was his home and she only spends the weekend. And after some family therapy, we agreed that she will be treated like a guest by me. She will have to follow the house rules and that at the extent of our relationship. Now while she is spoiled, she is a good girl, academically excellent. Except for the aforementioned incident, very respectful and just a pleasant young woman. The problem is that I did not know the extent to which my partner spent money on her. He pays some money as rent that I put into my son's college fund and we split the common bills in half. Everything else is our own responsibility, so we don't know much about each other's finances. Now my son is planning to do a tour of East Asia during the summer and I was happy to give him the money to do so, as a gift for getting into a very prestigious college. When my stepdaughter heard about it, she asked her dad to pay for a tour of Europe, since he didn't send her on one after she got into college. He agreed because he never says no. But he came to me asking me to lend him close to $30,000 because he can't afford the trip on his own. I am not even giving that much to my son and his plane tickets are more expensive. I refused. I said that since this wasn't an emergency, he can save and send her on the trip after she graduates college. Now he is not talking to me, saying that I am choosing favorites. I have no relationship with his daughter, so I don't know how that even is applicable. And that I am putting money over his happiness and relationship with his daughter. I can easily afford to lend him the full amount, I just don't want to, because his reasons are not convincing enough.